Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Jim Ewing with Provision Solutions. We've enjoyed sharing insights, inspiration, and informative updates through our Marketplace Ministries events. Whether in person or virtual, there's been a wealth of great resources provided. Details are provided in the comments below, along with information on staying informed of upcoming events and interacting with others online. We trust you'll enjoy the segment and invite you to be a part of our Marketplace Ministries Network. We'd love to have you as part of our collaborative Christian community. Thanks. And now, here's our presentation. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. Welcome to our Marketplace Ministries Virtual Event. We're broadcasting this or making it available on March the 8th, 2023, and we're delighted to have you with us. This is actually one of 5 different events that we've been hosting over the course of the fall and the spring of each year, and we've been following a pattern that we'll tell a little bit more about in just a moment, but we've just been having a great time gathering great resources and information to help us move forward. My name is Jim Ewing. I'm going to be your facilitator for our event today, and we do appreciate all who have joined with us across North America, because one of our guest speakers is actually from California, and we're delighted to have him with us, and another guest speaker from the Edmonton area, but traveling the world as well, just got back. So we'll have more from our 2 guest speakers in just a moment or two. So with respect to what we are doing, the question might be asked, well, what is it that you want to accomplish with what you're doing? Well, let me tell you, I'm glad you asked. We're trying to help those who are interested in representing Jesus Christ in the marketplace more effectively and honoring him in whatever it is that the Lord has us doing in our vocation, in our education, when we interact with others, just wherever it is that God has us at the moment. We want to be effective. And I think what we've been doing is helping those gather more information, resources, and building a sense of community that will really help us to be more effective in those roles. So thank you for joining us. Let's start with a brief word of prayer here and make sure that we have ourselves in tune with what the Lord would want to impart to us over the course of our time together. Let's pray. Father in heaven, it's good that you are a good Father and that you care for us, your children. And we are so thankful that you've given us opportunity to work together in community and to support one another, to help each other grow, and to be more effective in representing you where you have us. And we would just pray that as we set this time aside, that you would in fact speak to us. Give us nuggets of wisdom that would come from you, Holy Spirit, that we would be able to put that into our daily routines, into our practice, and that you would open up doors of opportunity where we can, in fact, be the hands and the feet of Jesus Christ extended to a needy world. So thank you for all that will be shared in this time together and what you will continue to do as we desire to serve you in those places where you have us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, as you probably know, we have an agenda. We have some things that we'd like to cover off today. Our broad theme today, as you probably read, is focused on aspects of funding. Funding sources for startup and growth is kind of the broad theme that we have. But we want to really explore some of the extremities of that, perhaps. And we will be talking a little bit about funding sources over the course of the evening. And I want to encourage you, just as you are also perhaps adding your contact information into the chat, I would like to encourage you as well to maybe put in a thought that you have that you would share with us. Perhaps it's some wisdom that you've come across over the years of truths that would be relevant to us as we think about what funding sources we would go to. Where would we go to? Where would we approach? Why would we go? What would our heart position be with respect to the funding needs that we would have for whatever it is that we're doing? And that could be for a business. It could be for some sort of a ministry opportunity that you have impressed upon your heart by the Lord, or maybe it's some sort of a special project that, again, you see a need and you're feeling brought in to try to address some of that need. So again, I'd encourage you, is there some words of wisdom, maybe from the Bible or from your experiences, that you would share with us over the course of the evening? Just add that into the chat, and we would be ever so appreciative of that. So tonight's event, we've got two great presenters who are going to be speaking to us. I've enjoyed speaking with both of them and meeting them over the last, little while. I think I've actually connected with Dr. David Gill more. Well, he's got the longer period of time of my having known him than this other gentleman, Danny Hooper, who's going to be speaking with us in a moment. But I've known of Danny Hooper in the Edmonton area for quite some time, and I'm really excited to have Danny and David Gill on the program here tonight. This topic area of funding, this is kind of interesting because one of the areas that I've had some exposure to, not just in, say, business financing or personal financing over the years, is within the Christian community, aspects of connecting with good projects and fundraising needs that come within the Christian community. And whether it's for a special project or a missions activity, or maybe it's some sort of a building program, I think all of us have maybe seen some of those types of activities going on. But fundraising is definitely one aspect that I think we should give some consideration to. And whether it's for starting something or for an organization that's already up and running and looking to go to a next level, or for a good aspect that they want to put some attention and focus on, fundraising can be a powerful way of doing that. And I know that Danny Hooper has been one of the people that I've known for a number of years that has been very active in this area. Danny, it's been good to meet you and your good wife, Barb, and have conversations with you. We're going to get out for coffee one of these times when your schedule allows for that, I'm pretty sure. Danny's no stranger to being in the spotlight. I've seen some of his activities where he has been taking charge of a situation and leading people through a process that is intended to raise significant dollars for worthy causes. And Danny is, in fact, one of Canada's top-rated fundraising auctioneers, and he's done projects for groups, you may know some of these names: David Foster Foundation, Ronald McDonald Houses, a little organization south of the border, the NFL. Danny has served big organizations, and he's also looked after small ones, big and small. Danny does them all. So he's got a terrific sense of humor. I've enjoyed conversations with him. He puts that into every presentation, every activity that he undertakes. And it's just a delight, Danny, to have you with us on this program. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jim. What a kind introduction that was. And good evening and welcome, everybody. It's just a real honor for me to join you tonight. When Jim invited me to participate in this opportunity, I didn't have to think twice. My name is Danny Hooper. I grew up on a cattle ranch. A little bit of my background: I was born in Edmonton, where I live now. I grew up on a cattle ranch about an hour west of Edmonton. And my career originally started in the country music industry. And I was a musician, professional musician for many, many years. And I started actually back in 1975. I entered an amateur talent competition that our local country radio station had at our Klondike Days, our annual exhibition. And I was a finalist in that competition, and the prize was a recording contract. And I've still got the trophy for that contest hanging on my wall in my room, in my man cave downstairs there. And it's one of the it's probably the most meaningful award that I've ever received, and it marks the official start of my career in the entertainment business. And I'm excited for 2025 because that's going to be my 50th anniversary as an entertainer. And so I've had lots of experience behind a microphone and lots of experience in the music industry. I have an uncle who was an auctioneer, and back in 1987, he invited me to come along with him to a Ducks Unlimited auction, and he wanted to know if I would MC the evening, and I was MCing, and I had some of the crowd laughing, and Uncle Wes, I call him Uncle Wes. He's actually not a blood relative, but he was my dad's best friend. And you remember when you're a little kid, you had lots of uncles. So Uncle Wes, he invited me up to auction off one of the Ducks Unlimited prints, and I knew nothing of auctioneering, so I got up and just goofed around. And anyway, I did the best I could, but I sold this print for $850 when Uncle Wes was only getting $150 for the prints that evening. So he took me aside. He said, "You know what?" He said, "You should really consider combining your gift as an entertainer with your sense of humor and get your auctioneer's license and focus on fundraising." And he was a great visionary back at that time, because back in that day, auctioneers were expected to donate their time to do charity auctions. I went to auction school eventually down in Billings, Montana, to the Western College of Auctioneering to get properly trained and properly certified. And I remember part of the curriculum, they told us that you're expected to go out and donate your time. Well, I came back to Edmonton with my certification, started donating my time, but then the phone was ringing off the hook, and I started charging $500. Then eventually the fees just went up as I just was running out of time. So I probably was the first I know I was the first in Canada, certainly in Western Canada, to approach fundraising as a business. And in fact, and all of my clients to this day, when people call to, inquire about my services, it's the same story from everybody. Well, we're nonprofit and we're charity and all of this, and we're all volunteers. And the first response that I have for those folks is that when it comes to fundraising and doing fundraising events, and if you're thinking of having a fundraising auction as a component of your fundraising model for the year, you need to stop thinking like a charity and start thinking like a business. And so since 1987, I've been working very, very hard to develop the techniques and the skills and the strategies to approach a room of potential givers or potential philanthropists, or whatever you want to call it, to approach a room at a fundraising event. And the thing that differentiates what I do or what any certified fundraising auctioneer does, and I should probably back up for a second, and I mentioned, to my knowledge, I was the first in Canada, I think, to really start doing this as a business. What was happening is that, these nonprofit organizations would get a local auctioneer to come and do their auction, but a normal auctioneer, if he's a livestock auctioneer, he's concerned with one thing and one thing only, and that's how much can I get for this cow, or can I get for this bull, or can I get for this steer or this heifer? If it's an auto auctioneer, a car auctioneer, he's concerned with how much I can get for this old Ford Mustang. Once it's sold, it's gone. So I started to think differently about this, and I should mention that even though I was the first to start charging, today there's a certification that comes from the National Auctioneers Association in the States, and it's called the Benefit Auctioneer Specialist. I went and got that certification right away as soon as they came out with that. So it now is not only recognized, but a highly specialized field within the auction industry. So what differentiates the benefit auction specialist from a regular auctioneer? As I mentioned, the livestock auctioneer says, how much can I get for this cow? Or car auctioneer, how much can I get for the car? Or an antique dealer, how much can I get for this painting? We, on the other hand, walk into a room and we say, what's the potential here? How much money is in this room? And how can we go about capturing as much of that money as possible? And there are countless techniques and strategies for doing that. And so I started to, as I worked my way through the years, I would get into events where I would see a neat idea. So I would gather that, use that in my next event, and I go to another event, see another good idea. And over the years, and especially at the Rotary auctions, because the Rotary auctions are quite unique in that a Rotary Club is typically made up of entrepreneurs, a lot of business people, very creative, very ambitious. And so a lot of the best ideas I ever encountered came from the Rotary auctions that I was doing. And so finally, I gathered all this information And as I started to get busier, clients were calling all the time saying, well, how do we get auction items? How do we sell tickets? What order do we put our auction items in? What are some of the other, how do we set up raffles? What are some of the other things we can do to extract more money out of that room while we have that once a year opportunity? And when these organizations host a gala or a fundraising night, for many of them, that's their Super Bowl. They've only got that one shot during the year to if that's their major fundraiser, and they've got to make every moment count. So I finally took all of these ideas, and back a number of years ago, I wrote a book, and it's called Easy Money: How to Generate Record Profits at Your Next Fundraising Auction Event. And it is chock full of all of these great ideas. And it's time to revise the book, because since I released the book back in, I think it was 2013 or 2014, I've come across 100 more great ideas for raising money at fundraising events. So, but it's kind of good, I recognize where my talents and my gifts and all of this comes from, and it definitely comes from our Lord. And so I made the decision here over COVID to not charge for the book anymore. I was selling it, but now I gladly give that away. And so anyway, that's kind of a neat little tool. But so Jim, if you want to ask a question, I'll maybe answer it. Oh, Jim can't find his mic. There we go.
It's a little different than a mic drop. I just couldn't find it to pick it up in the first place.
Button, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Danny, that's awesome. I didn't mention on the front end here, you have found some measure of success with this. You've alluded to it. You've talked about your certification and your credentials, which are awesome. But if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw the number $250 million.
Yeah, that's the amount that, as we've best been able to track through my records, that we have raised, that I've been able to assist organizations in raising since I started doing this back in 1987. So, yeah, definitely lots of there's just lots of money to be had by doing a fundraising auction event, and that's kind of that's my sandbox. And there's so many neat things. Some of the techniques that I use, maybe I should talk about that. When I came up with an idea a number of years ago, and again, it was at a Rotary auction. Somebody came up at the end of the night and asked a question or made a statement that I've heard many, many times. And they said, you know what, Danny, I would have been happy to donate an item to the auction tonight, but nobody asked me. And I heard this over and over for a number of years. And so I finally came up with an idea at another Rotary auction. What I decided to do was I picked up a package of these neon colored index cards, these Oxford index cards, and they're like a recipe card or whatever you want to call them. And I placed a couple of these cards on each table that night at the event. And I was at the Spruce Grove Rotary Club. I did their auction for 24 consecutive years, just a suburb of our city, Edmonton here. And the first night I tried this, I called it a wild card auction. And I got up on stage and I said, ladies and gentlemen, often I hear that people did not donate to the auction because they weren't asked. So here's your opportunity. I placed a couple of these cards on every table. And very simply, if you have something that you feel is of value and would be of interest to this crowd here tonight, perhaps you have, and I've learned over the years to kind of seed their thinking. And I'll say, if you have a vacation property, maybe you have a home down in Phoenix or California, a winter home that you could donate for a week or two. Maybe you have a houseboat or a pontoon boat. You could take somebody for a ride around your lake and host a barbecue. Maybe you have a private airplane. You could take somebody for a ride. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to seed them with ideas of valuable items. What I've learned, what we want to steer away from is the local dentist donating a tooth whitening or the lawyer donating a divorce, right? Because those are hard sells. The divorce thing is really hard to sell at a fundraising auction. So I have seen, I've had some funny things happen. I was doing an auction for Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church out in Sherwood Park, and the Monsignor Jack Hamilton Father Hamilton donated a wild card item. He called it Pew with a View. And this was guaranteed front row seating at midnight mass on Christmas Eve for a family of 4. And it sold for $3,000. I couldn't believe it. I said, well, this is wonderful. You can sit home on Christmas Eve and drink until 11:45 and then walk in here like you own the place and slide the nuns over and you get front row seating. Well, he was so surprised that we got $3,000 for this that they ended up throwing in a case of red wine. I was doing another event, and it was a little rural community, a little farming community, and it was our RCMP, our National Police Force. They were having a Red Surge Ball, and they do this in all the communities through the year. They host a dinner and hold a little. It's a goodwill thing that the RCMP do in the communities, and the hall was half full of the RCMP families with the spouses, and the other half of the hall was full of the farm families. And some smart kid, 17-year-old kid, sent up a card and he said, I will donate a guided gopher hunt in a stolen truck with unregistered firearms and all the moonshine that you can drink. And it sold for $2,000. And guess who bought that? The local staff sergeant bought that. So, and then I was in Cold Lake, Alberta, up where we have our Air Force base. And we had a side of beef cut and wrapped for the freezer. A local rancher donated that. One of the grandmas up there, the Babas, donated 12 dozen homemade pierogies. That sold for $350. And another Baba stood up and she said, I make better pierogies than her. And in fact, her pierogi sold for $650. And then the town doctor sent up a card and he said, I will donate a painless vasectomy for 2. And I thought it was a joke. So I threw the card on the floor. Literally, I just set it aside. And I kind of root through these things, and things that I think are either not serious or not a good item. I'll just drop them on the floor. And he got quite upset with me. And I said, well, I thought you were joking. He said, no, I was serious. And I said, well, I don't know who will pay for this. You can get this done for free in Alberta. But I said, all right, gentlemen, I said, we have the good doctor has donated a painless vasectomy for 2. And I said, I thought that's how they come. What's the point of getting 1 done? But I said, is anybody want to bid $300? Well, a guy in the far corner went $300. And I said, wow, how about 400? A guy in the opposite corner went 400, 500, 6, 7, 8, 9. And anyway, we ended up selling for $3,800, this vasectomy. And as soon as I said sold, the guy's wife stood up and went, woohoo, and she was about 8 months pregnant. So we got $3,800 there. I went to the other couple and I said, if you'll come up to $3,800 as well, this is a technique we call the double up. Yeah, and I said, if you'll come up to $3,800 as well, I can probably get the doctor to do a couple more snips. And I said, Doc, are you okay with it? He said, absolutely. So we ended up getting $7,600 from that one wild card. I was doing an auction down in Dana Point, California for the National Football League, their athletes' first event. And this was just a couple of weeks after Nick Foles had led his team to a Super Bowl championship. And he was sitting in the front row. And so I did my pitch for the wild cards. And I only had 2 cards come up that night. But they were good enough. The one card gentleman said, I have a brand new Gulfstream jet and I'll take 10 people. You pick the city, you pick the game, you pick the restaurant, you pick the hotel. We'll fly you home the next day. That sold for $75,000. And then without me even asking, because that means I had somebody else on at $70,000. And that's a real thing to think about here when you're doing these fundraising events. Often, I always say to people, to my clients, I say, think about the second high bidder, that person that was not successful in buying the auction item. It's easy to add up all of your sales that night. You've had 10 auction items, and it's easy to get a total of what you got for the live auction. But now go and add up all those second high bids that weren't successful. Now, where's all that money going? And it's going right out the door at the end of the night and going home with those people. So that's why you have to have a bunch of different strategies and techniques. and things to do to glean that extra money. And one of those things is the double up technique. Well,
Danny,
normally I would have asked the gentleman normally to donate a second flight, but I didn't even have to ask. As soon as I said sold at 75,000, he went like this, and he said, and I said, "Are you okay for another?" He said, "Absolutely, do a second trip." So I went to the second high bidder at 70,000. I said, "You can have the same trip if you want to match at 75." He said, "Absolutely." So 150,000. Then the only other card that came up that night, and I was surprised because the room was full that night with players and coaches and successful business and wealthy people, a lot of money in the room. But I only had one other card come up, and it was a fellow sent a card up, and he said, "I don't have a Gulfstream, but I've got a nice little Learjet, and I'll fly you to Las Vegas to stay with Andrea Agassi and Stephanie Graf in their home. We'll stay in their home, and we'll get private tennis lessons for the weekend." Well, that sold for $65,000. So that's an idea that came from God, I believe it, to do the wild card auction. And I don't know how many millions of dollars that idea has generated since I started doing that one. So that's just one of the neat techniques. I was doing an auction in Toronto for David Foster Foundation, and Andrea Bocelli was the entertainer that night. And he donated 2 seats on his private jet to fly back to Florence, Italy, to stay with he and his wife in their home for 4 nights. And he said, "I hope you don't mind my singing because I practice for 2 hours every morning out by the pool. I have lunch, I have a nap, I get up and I sing for another hour in my lemon cello or whatever his little lemon room is there and stuff." And that sold for $100,000. So there's lots of neat things you can do when you've got a room full of people.
Danny, those are awesome stories. Someone's been asking, what's the title of your book and how can they find it?
Well, it's called Easy Money, How to Generate Record Profits at Your Next Fundraising Event. I had it online, and I've taken it down now because, to be honest, it was costing more to mail the book than what the price of the book was. I think I was charging $24 or $24.99 for the book. I'm happy to give the book away if anybody wants to order it. If they want to pay the postage, they pay the postage, and I'm happy to send you as many books as you would like. I believe these ideas, some of the ideas in the book are my own ideas, like the wildcard auction, things I've come up with. Most of it are just great ideas that have come from other people. And I believe that part of my mission in honoring the Lord and being thankful for the gifts and talents and blessings that I have is to share this information and knowledge. And, I could care less if really, and I don't want that to sound wrong, but when people call to maybe book me, I send them, if they're in Canada, I send them 6 complimentary books right away, whether they book me or not. And I really don't care if I get the booking. That's not important. What's important is that they work so hard to get people to come to an event. It's not easy getting tickets sold. You've got the risk of the caterers and booking your venue and all of the countless hours of volunteer work going out and soliciting auction items and setting up your silent auction, your super silent auction, your raffles, and doing all of that stuff. And it's just such a shame that money is left on the table when they're doing an event. So it's important to me that people learn how to set their event up properly and capture as much of the money as they can in the room. So
I'm sure the book has a lot of great guidance for people who are thinking that this could be a way that they would approach fundraising through an auction.
Oh, yeah. The book is designed. There's a good idea that comes off every page. I actually spent $10,000 on just the design of the book with an artist to draw cartoons in there and highlight boxes and take the information. So there's lots of pictures in there for people that can't read very well. And there's in the back of the book, I've got a list of the 400 best live auction items that I ever sold. There's guidance in there on how to sell tickets to your event, on how to structure it, your agenda for the evening, and set it all up. And it's a bestseller. It's a bestseller for me now in Canada, so we're proud of that.
Danny, would you put your coordinates in the chat there so people can get in touch with you if it's not there already?
Yeah, I put my email address in, so
people
can email me and we can get a book to them if they would like.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Let's have a virtual round of applause for Danny Hooper.
Thank you.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I could see him clapping.
Okay. All right. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. I'm going to move and change gears here now a little bit. And again, if any of you have some tips and suggestions or Bible verses that talk about funding and what our heads should be, where our heads and where our hearts should be with respect to finances and for the good causes or businesses or things that we're doing, by all means, you can add some reference to that in the chat as well. We'd look forward to seeing that information from you. But Dr. David Gill, it's been just a delight for me personally to be able to connect with you. That happened about 3 years ago. I think it may have been before COVID or just as we went into COVID. I was introduced to you with one of the forums that you run for workplace313.org, your organization. And I've participated or sat in on a couple of those, and they've been just terrific. I would really encourage any of our audience that wants to tap into those to check out what David has on WP313.org. I think I got that right. And he has them listed there in the forums that are back issues as well as ones that are upcoming. But I sat in on one, the very first one, where you had 5 entrepreneurs talking about the experience that they had with you and Pastor Larry Ward in the Boston area. And you talked about that in one of your many books, this one here, Workplace Discipleship 101, which is one of the resources we've recommended on our Facebook group for those who are part of our audience here. Workplace Discipleship 101, a great resource. And you talk about that experience in Boston for 3 years. You're a prolific author, many articles, credentials. I can't even begin to mention all of the things here, but I think it's evident, as Danny pointed out, with all the books in the back, you are a learned individual, and we can learn a lot from you. So I'm going to turn it over to you and have you share with us some of the things that you believe would be beneficial for our audience to know about funding and aspects related to that. David.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. After listening to Danny, my first thought is get Danny on your board of your organization and keep drawing on his enthusiasm and context. I really work the other side of the street. Now, I have spoken to a lot of Rotary clubs, but I wasn't running auctions, this type of thing. For me, I'm 77, and so I'm really racing toward the conclusion here somehow. But it was really when I was, my whole life is a series of nonprofit organizations, and we've always succeeded in never running a profit. So I have been very successful at nonprofits, mostly, in the educational world. So I've been a professor all my life, taught business ethics to MBA students for a lot of my life, and also taught Christian ethics and workplace ethics in the theology of work to seminary students. So that's kind of my background. It all started when I was an undergraduate at Berkeley in the 60s, wondering how does scripture and my faith relate to what I'm studying here at Berkeley? Because it should have some relationship. I want Jesus to be the Lord of the way I think about my profession. I was going to be a high school history teacher at the time. And so that just led to the rest of my career, really. It's one endless series almost of entrepreneurial kinds of things. I just finished my memoir, actually, which is called What Are You Doing About It? The Memoir of a Marginal Activist. And I wave this because really the story is about these kinds of projects. And a lot of it is, well, part of it anyway, is how did we fund these things? We were very idealistic children of the 60s, and so we didn't think practically. We thought anything's possible with God. And, in the counterculture of the time, we didn't feel like we have to go down traditional paths of education or anything else, even though, we jumped through the hoops, and I did a PhD at University of Southern California and stuff like that. But anyway, I'll talk about the Boston entrepreneurship program in just a moment. But after listening to Danny, what I would say is, first of all, to raise money, and I've had to try to raise money. I didn't ever think of myself as primarily called to fundraising, but I've had to do that and wanted to do that just because I believe in these projects. And so one of the very first things I did actually after my PhD was I organized a group of Berkeley alumni, and we started a graduate school called New College Berkeley. And it was modeled on Regent College in Vancouver, BC. If you know this place, it's a graduate school of theology, but not to train pastors. It was founded to train lay people. And we loved that model of a graduate level experience for people who were in law or whatever it was, business, art, whatever it was. And now, how are we going to do that? And what I would say is the first thing about it is I believe God has a lot of money. I've never had a lot of money myself, although the California real estate market makes it look on paper like I have a lot of money. But, I never really had a lot or really cared much about trying to become rich or anything like that. And I don't have a lot of friends who are super wealthy either. But it's building friendships. It's building a network that I could get, first of all, passionate about the mission. So, when it comes to most of these things, I think a for-profit business too, if you want investors, you've got to sell them on the mission and purpose. What is the product that you intend to try to produce? And I think even in an auction, a Rotary Club auction or something like that, one thing is you want those things that you're auctioning, those have to have value that people will want, like that vacation stay or whatever it is. The Shania Twain tickets, I was thinking when you were talking about country music in Canada, I was hoping you would offer some of those. But anyway, you have to have a mission that really connects with people's mind and connects with their heart, even, especially in a nonprofit sector, because you're not selling something in order for them to make a profit on this. You're selling them on something that's important in life and will tap into what they think life is all about. So the thing that, I've always felt, as my main mission is trying to help people relate their faith to their work, and people understand that intuitively, that Jesus is Lord of everything, not just our church life, and not just our personal life and that kind of thing, but Jesus ought to be Lord of that 1/3 of our life that we spend at work or preparing for work. And so that's a fairly easy sell. And then to say, we don't get a lot of help in our local churches for lots of reasons. Our pastors don't preach on how to integrate your faith with your work in any detail, at least. And they shouldn't try to be detailed experts on Christianity and the law or something like that either. But they need help. And so my approach has been to create a series of programs, sometimes growing out of the institution where I was teaching, sometimes to create the school, like I said, in Berkeley. So what did we do? I mean, once the mission is kind of clear in your own mind and it's a compelling mission, I think the next thing is to build a team. And so I've never tried to do anything just all on my own. I mean, I'm a very energetic kind of guy, but I've never felt like I know everything or that I can do anything on my own. I try to build a team. I first of all try to sell my friends or sell contacts on 2 or 3 people, and then expanding that out. And for a nonprofit especially, I feel like when you don't have another institution or a big fund behind you or a big rich person behind you, you have to build a larger group. And so I would build a board of trustees that has, like a dozen people or something with different kinds of talents, not all of them rich, but, I followed this thing where the 3 W's, board members ought to bring wealth, wisdom, and or work. They need to contribute. And I've always challenged all the board members of organizations I've been part of to be donors. And I say, you may be tapped out and can't give a lot, but just for solidarity, I'd like you to contribute something every year. So we can tell foundations, we can tell other people, all of our board members are in on this thing. They're all participating. And then I would just say, it's a lot about networking, and it's a lot about pastoral care as well. And so when I'm raising donations, I reach out to people. I almost always like in the Workplace 313 thing, we have about 1,200 people on our mailing list at this point. But we have a dozen board members, and we have about 60 donors at this point. But I write to those donors. I have a basic letter that I send out in September when we do our annual campaign, but I always personalize it. I write something to them that is personal at the beginning of the letter. And when they donate, or even if they say, I can't because I'm tapped out, I follow up. And I don't write them a long thing, but it's that personal relationship. I never send a receipt for a donation without scribbling something on it. I learned this from a guy I was working with way back when, that even to send a receipt, just to scribble something on the envelope, it's that personal connection that I think really matters to people. And in a lot of the places where my wife and I donate, you don't get that kind of personal touch, and we give anyway, even though, we've kind of disappeared in a sense. But it's that kind of thing. So let me give you one story here. At New College Berkeley, we were running not just graduate programs, but we also ran conferences. And so one of the first ones we did was called Health Professionals as Christ's Servants. Okay, so we wanted doctors and nurses to come together. People said you'll never get doctors to associate with nurses and all this stuff. But anyway, we have 325 people come together for a couple days in Berkeley for this conference on health professionals as Christ's servants. So we didn't want to charge so much that nursing students or medical students wouldn't be able to afford it. So we kept the price at a reasonable, $75 or something. This was about 1980. But we also put on here something I almost always do, is an option to add a donation for student scholarships, or for scholarships for people who are in between jobs. I don't usually say unemployed. I say in between jobs. And people give, they would give money. So at this conference, there were people who added in, $50 or $100 or whatever it was. So then a year later, the president, I started this place, but I became the dean because I was a brand new PhD and I didn't think we'd have credibility with me playing president. Plus, I didn't want to be. But he made me be his dean when he came in. So anyway, they were having struggles making the budget and all this kind of thing. So they came in and asked me, well, David, could you help us raise our operating fund a little bit? We need some help. So I said, okay, look, I'll try to raise 50 grand. Okay. And what I'll do is I believe I know 100 people who are not current donors who could give $500. So I'm going to try to find 100 people to give $500 and make 50,000. So So where did I find these people? I went back and looked at who gave those little donations to the scholarship fund, because they're not on our regular donor base, but they were generous towards us. They understand what we're doing. So then I wrote to them and I said, here's what I'm trying to do. And I'm going to give you a call in the next couple of weeks to see if you got this and what you're thinking. And if you can't afford it, no worries. But anyway, so then a week or two later, I called up this a woman who had given $100 or something. And when I called her up, she said, David, or Professor Gill or whatever, she said, we would love to do this, but my husband just lost his job. And so we're just not able to do that right now. And I said, oh, man, for sure. Don't feel under any pressure to do that. And so she said, by the way, my husband is sitting here and he's really kind of depressed. Would you talk to him? So instantly I became telephone pastor. So I said, Bruce, tell me what's going on, and then I said, I gave him a little encouragement. And then I said, could I pray for you? Could I just say a prayer for you, before we go? Anyway, so then 2 weeks later, we get a check in the mail for $1,000 from these people. And they just said, she said to me, David, you were so encouraging to us and to my husband. We just decided together, we're going to trust God and we're going to write you this check no matter what. So then I write him back and tell him, this is amazing. 1 year later, I get this envelope in the mail with a check for $75,000. And they said, I just had an uncle in Texas who died and he had oil on his land. And so I've become a person with money. And so we wanted our very first check to be to New College Berkeley. And in a couple of years later, they donated 300 or 400 grand to help us with our library application and things like that. This is just like the perfect example. I've never had anything quite so big as that, but often people who get cared for, they become invested in this, and they believe in the mission. And so it's gratitude, it's pastoral care. I mean, I've just found that throughout my life, that I don't ever take anybody for granted. I know I've probably missed somebody and made mistakes, but that's my way of doing this. And when I ran a program in Boston, then 40 years later, I'm at Gordon Conwell Seminary. I was running a program called Workplace Theology, Ethics, and Leadership. And I wanted to open the program up so people who were unemployed or who had low incomes could be part of this. I didn't want to run a program for rich executive types only. I wanted everybody. And so I had some inner city pastors who really wanted to come to this, but didn't have very big salaries. And so I went to 5 of my friends. By this time, 40 years later, I have a few friends who are in technology or whatever, and I asked them each for 10 grand. And so I raised a $50,000 fund to be able to pay the expenses, the travel expenses, tuition, all that stuff for several members of our program. Then I started out, then I had a thing, and I'm almost done here, and then we can talk. But then one of the things that I was brought to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary because a couple of big business guys had endowed with a couple $1 million, a new chair, a new professorship in workplace theology and business ethics. And they looked all over the country to try to find somebody like me who had worked both in business schools and as a consultant in the business trenches, and then also in the seminary context. And I've written books on both sides of the street and things like this, and always been interested in how do they interact. So anyway, they brought me back to Gordon Conwell, even though I was already kind of old, but I spent 6 years back there. But anyway, so then a foundation came to me, and I've never had much luck approaching foundations. And my staff, we've spent a lot of time approaching foundations, but not scored much. My main fundraising success is by going to individuals, people in Silicon Valley or whatever. And then also grassroots fundraising. Most of the stuff I've done is people donating $100 to $500, $1,000 a year, something like that. And then loving these people. And then once in a while, it'll lead to, some bigger bucks. But anyway, so back in Boston, one of my concerns is that a lot of the Faith at Work ministries, and there's hundreds of those now. There was hardly anything back in the 70s when we started New College Berkeley. Now there's hundreds all over the place, like Jim is doing such a great thing up there in Edmonton. That's how we connected. But anyway, a foundation came in and said, David, we've got money and we'd like to support something that you're doing. And so what ideas do you have? Well, I was kind of knocked over by that. But I said, well, how about if you fund a series of luncheons with all the faculty so I can, share with our entire faculty this whole idea of workplace discipleship and theology. And they said, yeah, but think bigger. We'll give you that, but think bigger. So anyway, I said, well, I have 2 big ideas. And the one that I'll tell you about is entrepreneurship. I said, I'm concerned because I don't want to just help people who are already well ensconced in careers and successful to relate their faith to work. I want to look at other people who don't have work or who don't have good work, and they're suffering in low-paying jobs, things like this. And so they said, yeah, we're interested. What are you going to do? So anyway, I found an urban pastor who was already a friend of mine and studying in my program, but an African-American guy who's one of my best friends now. And I said, why don't we work together to create an entrepreneurship program that will primarily focus on the city and people who are in the city, the inner city, who need jobs? Because here's the pitch. There are lots of people in and around our churches who don't have adequate jobs, or they may not have any job. They may have been downsized. They may be executives actually who lose jobs, but certainly there are a lot of people who are really hurting and need to have a better job. And so how about if we start a program where we're going to train pastors and lay church leaders to be coaches of entrepreneurs? And then so we found 15 people who were willing to commit to this program, and we had funded their tuition for this program. And so this partner and I, Larry Ward and I, then we taught them, okay, what are the characteristics of a high potential small business entrepreneur? So we gave them a list of what the characteristics are, a list I made up from my experience working with people. And so then their next job was to find somebody like that in their church or in the neighborhood around their church. So the second Saturday, they all showed up with their entrepreneur. So now there's 30 in the room along with the two professors. And so then we walked them over the next 8 weeks through a program teaching them, how do you figure out what your skills are and where there could be a market, and then also to be in alignment with the work of God, because that's our ultimate value system, is how can we align with God's work as a creator, a redeemer, a sustainer, a healer, a provider of wisdom, a bringer of justice, the things that God does throughout Scripture. We want to have our work line up in some way, and that's what inspires people. It inspires people to give to that. It inspires people to create jobs like that. But they need coaching, and there are people in our churches who know how to start a business, and just like there are people who don't know how to start a business, but they have some skill. So we help them identify that. Anyway, so in the end, what we did is, after they go through this program and create a small business plan, we gave them a $500 startup grant. We used this textbook, The $100 Startup, which was a bestseller book just a few years ago. And we told them, you won the lottery, because we're going to give you a $500 startup grant, not just a $100 one. We would help them start a business bank account and do all these basic things. They'd create a business plan. So that money came from a foundation. We did this 3 years in a row. We created 45 small businesses in Boston. I won't weary you by telling you about all of them, but it's amazing, from hairdresser stuff to cosmetics to voice lessons, to photography, just even a technology guy who was writing code for something. So anyway, it was great. And even now, 6 years after I left, or maybe it's 10 years since I left, I'd say out of those 45, probably 15 of them are thriving and the people can live off the income. Another 15 are on life support, or at least they haven't grown to the point where they could quit their other part-time job or something, And then another 15 are either, some of those died for lack of, they couldn't get the government permits to run a food operation, or they were reaching too far. But anyway, I've often thought that our churches could do the same kind of program. This doesn't need to be seminary led or anything like that. But in a church, or maybe 2 or 3 churches in Edmonton, could join together to raise $10,000, let's say, or let's say $5,000, in order to give 10 $500 grants like that, and then have a program that would go for 8 weeks, 8 Saturday mornings, have them read a little bit, have them do projects with their mentor, and then have a launch day where they start their landscaping business or their house cleaning business or whatever it is. So I think churches could put it in their budget, but even if they don't, and that sometimes is a long process, if we build the idea, I think we can sell it to some people who do have money. We can spread the word, and we could create a nonprofit or do it something like that. So anyway, that's kind of my fundraising story, and I'll stop there.
Well, David, thank you very much for sharing these insights and experiences with us. Both Danny and David, both of you have experienced many, many things in the business world, and you've sensed the Lord leading you and guiding you into the various aspects that you've actually ministered into people's lives, and in many different ways.
Just one other thing, Jim, I should have said, is that I've always had a lot of outside speaking engagements at churches, Rotary clubs, campus groups. So especially during those New College Berkeley days in the 80s, I averaged 50 to 80 outside speaking gigs at Rotary clubs, churches, campus groups for 14 years. So I beat myself up pretty bad. but it's that constant reaching out to broaden the network.
Yeah. I think what I really like, what I hear in what you've said here, David, is the passion that you have, the motivation that comes from within or from the Lord to do something positive in the lives of other people. You are in fact a servant in that respect, and ministering to people at their point of need. You've found a need, you've identified it, and you work with them, with your team, to help lift them up from the circumstances that they have, for whatever reason, found themselves in. The outcome, of course, we can't control that. But what we can do is we can provide some insight, some guidance, direction, a helping hand, a mentor, a coach, and together we can do our very best to help move someone forward. They have to take responsibility and make the most of the opportunity that's presented in front of them. And Lord willing, they walk in the path that the Lord would have for them, just as we would walk, following the direction that the Lord would give to us. What I'd like to do is open up to our audience here. Come off mute, ask a question, or if you want both of them to try to respond to that, that's fair game.
Yeah, we're working in missions, and one of the things I would like to, for both of you guys, and Danny Hooper, I kind of been living in Edmonton all my life, and you're a famous guy around my family, so that's kind of cool. But both of you guys, as we're kind of first step, we're doing partnership raising, but eventually we want to start doing business as mission, and probably start to reach out to people to help support missionaries going into other countries to start a business. So one of my goals is how to get in front of people with means, ability to actually participate and do things, either to sponsor something or to maybe invest in something.
I think networking. I mean, I may not know a lot of rich people because I don't belong to some country club around here, but I'm like 1 degree away from everybody. If I don't know him, maybe Danny does. So I might say, Danny, can you help me get on the golf course with so and so, or can we take him out to lunch? Something like that.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make, David. The networking is huge, and I travel in those circles as a fundraising auctioneer. These galas, that's who most of the organizations want to go and create a guest list made up of people who have means to come and support at the event. So, yes, I've been around lots of very, very wealthy people, and different things trigger them. It's, and I talk about that in the book. One of the things that I do at my events is a straight cash appeal. Some auctioneers refer to this as a fund a need, funded item, and it's just a very simple ask for money, knowing full well that a lot of these people already have the means to acquire stuff, and they're at a point in their careers and lives very often where they don't want any more stuff. So what sells well at the charity auctions or the fundraising auctions are the experiential items. Couple of one interesting story. One of the most difficult auctions I ever had was at the Griffin Mansion in Vancouver, right out on Promontory Point there. This is the family that started the CTV, our national television network, our second major one after the CBC. And so a hugely wealthy family. They'd given their home up to serve as the venue for this fundraising gala. I can't even remember what the organization was we were raising money for, but very exclusive guest list, 100 people only, $10,000 a ticket to attend. They had the Vancouver Philharmonic playing out on the back lawn. They had brought in 2 world-famous pianists from Asia, one playing a Steinway piano at that end of the house, the other a Steinway piano at the other end of the house. And the auction was a flop. We had 8 auction items. They were all private jet trips to exclusive resorts and private homes and things like that. And in the aftermath of it all, we realized that the reason the auction was a flop is because all of these people already had their own private jets, and they already had, a lot of them had multiple homes around. So we realized after that what would have worked better would have been something like a 10-day ride on a donkey up a mountain in Tibet, some kind of a very exclusive experience. But it was too late, and we really crashed. That was the toughest auction I ever had. It was ridiculous. Somewhere along the way, I started to really hone my skills, just asking for money and doing these cash appeals at auctions. And on my website at dannyhooper.com, you can watch. I'm doing an event for an organization that is raising money for Compassion House, and that's a pseudo-residential facility next to our cancer clinic here in Edmonton, where women recovering from breast cancer and different types of cancer can come and live in a residential type of an environment. They had a $250,000 mortgage they were trying to pay off. We had about 600 people in the room that night. And I got on stage and I said, well, there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can try and raise the money through the auction items that we have. I said, there's probably an easier way. I said, I know with a crowd this size that we probably have 25 of the most successful business people in our city in this room tonight. So I'm starting to build their egos. And I said, I know that if we asked, we could probably, get 25 of these successful people to donate $10,000. What I don't know is if we could do that in a minute. So now I'm gamifying it. And I said, let's just have some fun and see if we can pay off this mortgage in a minute. I said, is there anybody here that'll start it off and pledge $10,000? Well, the hands started popping up like tulips in the springtime. And in 90 seconds on the video, you can see we raised, I think it was 36 hands went up, so $360,000. Now we had the problem. They weren't anticipating cash appeal. I wasn't planning to do one that night. We hadn't set up for it, and we didn't have bid cards. The people did not have bid card numbers, so I was concerned now, how are we going to capture all of this giving? So God sent me these words, and I just said, quick, all of you who just raised your hand, can we get you on the stage for a group photo? So we captured all 36 people. They all got on stage, and we got a group photo with all of them, because I know from experience that in the excitement of it all, and the crowd's giving a standing ovation for all these people, I know in the excitement, lots of people, not lots, but there are people I've experienced who will stand up in the moment, put their hand up, but by the end of the evening, for whatever reason, maybe they've had a few drinks or whatever, they forget to stop at the cashier station and they head home with their money. But we captured everybody that night. So cash appeals are very, very important in raising the money. The galas, the lots of different reasons why these people with money will give. Lots of them are, I call it in the book, the gunslinger mentality. They like to show off, and in public, they like to be seen giving their money. Others will be enticed to buy something that is a rare experience, something that would be of interest to them. Yeah, you can entice them to buy. It's like going fishing, and you've got this, there's a school of fish out there, and you just throw out a variety of these hooks. And I just, this is a great tool to have in your toolbox, and I'd be happy to send you a book. It's got lots of different hooks that you can cast out when you've got a crowd of people in the room. But certainly networking, I get called lots of times. My clients will say, who can we call to get to come to our event? And I kind of steer away from that, because I don't want to ever take advantage of the people that I know are great supporters and great givers and support a variety of different events. So I personally, I don't like to get involved in that too much.
Danny, that's awesome. And David, thank you very much for those comments. Maybe we have time for one quick question and quick responses from our guest speakers. Is there another question?
I have one question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Gordon.
And you've sort of touched on this. One of the courses I teach is a management of nonprofit organizations. And the past week, we just finished the fundraising section of the course, and all the Gen Zs were a little bit offended by it. they felt that it was manipulation, even though we couch it in terms of, helping fulfill people's desires to give to a particular cause, and it's a matching process and a liberating process and so on. But they were still, I call it fundraising hesitant. And do you have other ways to approach that may convince them to that it is a morally defensible activity to go out and do an ask?
Wow. I can talk from personal experience. I know there's $250 million that I've been a part of raising with countless organizations since 1987 that has gone to a lot of good out there. What do these kids recommend? What do they suggest? What do they want just to go to the government, have the government hand over grants? And how else do they propose to raise money? Nobody is holding a gun to anybody's head at these events. And manipulation is a really strong and offensive word.
I was almost wondering if, David, in terms of ethics and the ethics of fundraising, is there something you could maybe add that would help all of us get our head and our hearts in the right position with regard to approaching people for funds?
Well, I always give people an out, and I give them dignity if they want to say no. So when I send out a general kind of fundraising letter, or if I'm speaking at a banquet, I would always say, this is Workplace 313's annual low pressure, no problem fundraising campaign. And then I would explain, once a year, we reach out to everybody. And because we're a nonprofit, we're dependent on people's donations, and we run a very tight ship. Our budget is completely transparent. And, so I try to be as transparent. And then I always say, we realize that our friends are really generous people, and you may be tapped out already or maxed out on your giving for this year. And if so, God bless you. Don't worry about this. We understand that completely. But if you are able to make a donation, it would be really amazing. And, that sort of thing. So I would always give people a kind of out and not try to manipulate people beyond that. And I think people appreciate that.
Yeah, if I can just comment to that, David, too. In my sandbox at the fundraising galas, I've seen auctioneers go, "Hey, Bob, come on. We know that you just sold your business," and that kind of intimidation. That's highly manipulative and highly offensive and never acceptable in my mind. But if I can just address, when we're setting up a cash appeal at an event and we're going to start asking for money, I will typically ask at higher increments and come down, but I set it up by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to provide an opportunity for people to give. We understand that lots of people have enough stuff already and are not interested in the live or silent auction. We're going to provide another opportunity for you to give. This is not intended to intimidate anybody or make anybody uncomfortable. We're just going to ask very quickly. We'll move through and see if you'd like to make a donation. We also understand that a lot of people prefer to do this anonymously. So if you don't want to raise your hand, like you say, no pressure, no problem. But let's just get started here. We're raising money for this particular piece of equipment for the cancer hot. Would anybody consider pledging $5,000? And boom, 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 and 2,500 and 1,000, and let's go. And then at some point, I'll cut it off and say, again, we understand that some people prefer, and we just know that some people like to give this way. But if we know as well that some people prefer to be anonymous. So if you would like to make a donation, make sure you stop at the registration table on the way out. And thank you very much.
I think Collins had a comment before. Is that right? Collins, weren't you sticking your hand up?
No, I was going to ask, is that program still running, the what you shared with us with the entrepreneurial program that you helped start? Is it still going on? Are there plans to start one in the future, a new one elsewhere?
The seminary did not continue it after I retired, and they didn't want my teaching colleague to run the program because he didn't have the academic credentials that they felt they needed to have. And, I was disappointed in the seminary because even though they had this new chair in workplace theology, they didn't really buy in. They kind of liked me, but in my silo, they didn't really weave it into the way they
Yeah.
approached it. And that's the problem, is that seminaries don't train pastors to do the kind of thing that I and Jim Ewing and others are doing. And that's why we have so many parachurch kind of organizations and nonprofits that are trying to do that. And that's the case. We can make the case to our constituency that this is something that we all want to see our workplaces more ethical. There's just so much toxic stuff and corruption that sometimes happen. There's so many discouraged people. People are getting abused or discriminated against, or on the positive side, they don't have scope to really express their creativity in the image of God. And so we want to help people get there, and you can help us help them and participate. Join us. Come and work with us.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we've had some great conversations here. I want to thank Danny Hooper and David Gill. Two awesome presentations, and thank you for the added commentary here in the Q&A period. I see in the chat we've had a number of different pieces of information that have been coming in there, and let's see. I thought I spotted something about Girl Guide cookies in there. Was Louise? Was that you? Yeah, you added something about Girl Guide cookies, right? I like that. So we're going to want to save the chat here so that we can read through all of these things, and also to contact one another after tonight's session has concluded. I want to also just mention that the Facebook group that we have is free. We're not charging anything. Danny, we should get you to do an auction for registration, to be a part of our Facebook group. Just pump it up there. I don't know.
Yeah.
David Gill might have some questions about the ethics of that.
I have none.
Okay, none. But
I want to come to King's Scott. I want to come over there and talk those TikTokers.
Gord can make that happen. That's for sure. Hey, I just want to quickly mention a couple of things. I have seen in the entrepreneurial development space that when it comes to traditional funding sources, banks, treasury branches, credit unions, these types of financial institutions, here's the bottom line. No financial institution wants to take 100% of the risk on your business dream. So they're wanting you to put some of your own funding in to reduce their risk if things don't work out the way you think that they should. And I'd maybe just mention there are some alternate types of things that are out there. Crowdfunding sources like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, these are things that have been out there as alternate ways of raising funds for good causes, for things that you are passionate about. And if you're passionate about it, perhaps you can communicate that passion to another audience that will help support you. Even with little amounts, many people donating little amounts can make big things happen. So those are some things that you can maybe think about. Government-backed funding programs, there are a variety of different programs that are out there. Some of them are grant programs, but more often than not, they are very specific as to who they are targeted to. For rural communities, there have been programs to help fund businesses and organizations in rural communities, for women, for youth, for Indigenous, for newcomers. There's a variety of different groups that have the eye and support of funding agencies like governments and even not-for-profit organizations and foundations, as David was talking about. They will have groups that they are interested in supporting. So when it comes to venture capital and angel funders, these are the people like on the Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. If you've watched those shows on television, you see the types of initiatives that they take interest in, and they are willing to participate. They'll put some funds to back up your skin in the game. So again, they want to make sure you're in there and that you're going to be sticking it through even when the things get tough, because they will get tough. We know that. So those are things that you can keep in mind. And then there's all sorts of creative things that are low cost. And I like those ideas. David was talking about low cost methods of appealing to people, just little bits. Cooperating, working together, collaborating, donations, subscription models, bartering, trading services, trading goods, all of these things can come to the table to help provide the resources. That's the key, to get the resources that you need to move your business, to move your ministry, to move your special project forward. The Lord's given you this vision. I'm believing that. You believe it. And now it's a matter of communicating that vision to an audience that is receptive to providing the support. And they are out there. You just have to be able to effectively reach them. So thank you for joining us for today's session. That's awesome. Save the chat. I think you can do that. Someone once told me, I think in our last meeting, Gord, that you can press the 3 dots down there and then hit the phrase called save chat. I'm doing that right now. So I'm going to have all of this information available to me later. I'd invite you to come to the Facebook group. It's free to join. And you can continue conversation around the things that we've posted about today, this session, and just carry on the conversations there. God bless you in the things that he has called you to do, in the places where he has you to be his hands and to be his feet, to minister to the people that he introduces you to every day. Our next get together, April 19th, mark it on the calendar, striving for excellence in customer service. Look after those people that you're taking responsibility for. That's it. God bless you. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. We trust you found this to be helpful. And if so, please give us a like, a follow, and a share. The Bible says in Matthew, "Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." If you're launching or growing a business, a ministry area, or a special project, or if you're involved in helping them as a resource or service provider, we'd love to have you participate with us. Stay informed of upcoming events and items of interest by subscribing to the Marketplace Ministries Update, sent out periodically. May God bless you as you do your best to faithfully represent Jesus Christ in the marketplaces of life.